My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm 32 years old, and last Thanksgiving I discovered that my entire family had been talking behind my back for years. What started as a casual family dinner turned into the moment I realized my own aunt had been systematically undermining my success while secretly depending on it. The revelation didn't just destroy our family dynamic, it exposed a web of lies, jealousy, and manipulation that had been festering for decades. When I finally spoke those 5 words that changed everything, the silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was the sound of years of carefully constructed deceptions crumbling down. Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama that literally changed my entire perspective on blood loyalty, I need to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you're ready for a story about family betrayal that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this gets absolutely insane. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. Growing up, I was always the odd one out in my family. While my cousins followed traditional paths, college degrees, corporate jobs, marriage by 25, I chose a different route. After high school, I started a small digital marketing agency from my bedroom. My family, especially my Aunt Linda, never let me forget how disappointed they were in my choices. Sarah's wasting her potential, Aunt Linda would say during family gatherings, her voice dripping with that particular brand of condescension that only family members can master. She's playing around with computers instead of getting a real education. Her son Marcus was her golden child, fresh out of business school, landing what she called a real career at a prestigious marketing firm downtown. The comparisons were relentless. Every family dinner became an opportunity for Aunt Linda to highlight Marcus's achievements while subtly diminishing mine. Marcus just got promoted again, she'd announce, making sure everyone heard. He's working with Fortune 500 companies now. Such important work. Then turning to me with that fake, sympathetic smile. "How's your little hobby going, honey?" I tried explaining that my little hobby was actually generating 6 figures annually, that I had clients across 3 continents, that I'd built something from nothing. But Aunt Linda had a way of dismissing everything I said with a wave of her manicured hand. "Oh, sweetie, that's not sustainable. You need job security benefits, a real career path. Look at Marcus. He has health insurance, a 401k, corner office." The worst part wasn't just her dismissiveness, it was how the rest of the family gradually adopted her narrative. My parents started asking when I'd settle down and get serious about my future. My grandmother would slip me job postings she'd cut from newspapers. Even my younger sister began introducing me to people as the one who's still figuring things out. Marcus, to his credit, never actively participated in his mother's put-downs, but he never defended me either. He'd sit there basking in the praise while I endured the subtle humiliation. Sometimes I caught him looking uncomfortable, but he never spoke up. His silence felt like complicity. The irony was crushing. While they celebrated Marcus's real career, I was working 80-hour weeks, building something meaningful, creating jobs for others. My team had grown to 12 employees. I'd been featured in industry publications. I'd spoken at conferences. But none of that mattered to Aunt Linda. If it wasn't a traditional corporate job, it wasn't legitimate. The breaking point came when I bought my house. At 29, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a beautiful 3-bedroom home in a great neighborhood. I was so proud, so excited to share the news with my family. But Aunt Linda's response crushed that joy instantly. "Well," she said, examining her nails with studied indifference, "I suppose when you don't have student loans to pay off, you can afford nice things. Marcus is being responsible, investing in his education and career development. He'll be much better off in the long run." That comment stung because it revealed how little she understood my journey. I'd worked for everything I had. Every client I'd landed, every late night I'd spent perfecting campaigns, every rejection I'd faced, it had all led to this moment of achievement. But in her eyes, my success was somehow less legitimate because I hadn't followed the prescribed path. The family dynamics became increasingly toxic. Aunt Linda would use every opportunity to contrast my instability with Marcus's security. She'd share articles about the gig economy's dangers in family group chats, always with a pointed comment about some people who chose risky career paths. She'd loudly discuss Marcus's benefits package during family dinners, emphasizing how smart he was to choose stability over uncertainty. What hurt most was watching other family members nod along, buying into her narrative completely. They genuinely believed that Marcus was the success story and I was the cautionary tale. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. I was literally more successful by every measurable metric, yet somehow I was the failure. The situation reached new levels of absurdity when Marcus got engaged to his college girlfriend, Jennifer. Aunt Linda treated this announcement like Marcus had personally ended world hunger. She immediately began planning an elaborate engagement party, sending out save the dates 6 months in advance, and insisting it would be the event of the year. Of course, Marcus deserves the best, she announced to the family during Sunday dinner. He's worked so hard to build his career, and now he's ready to start the next chapter of his life. This is what success looks like: stability, commitment, a bright future. The implied criticism of my own relationship status wasn't lost on anyone. I'd been dating Alex for 3 years, but because we weren't engaged, Aunt Linda treated our relationship as frivolous. When you find someone who appreciates your lifestyle, Sarah, maybe you'll understand what real partnership means, she'd say with that poisonous smile. The engagement party planning became another opportunity for Aunt Linda to showcase Marcus while diminishing everyone else. She insisted on hiring the most expensive caterer in town, booking the country club's main ballroom, and sending invitations that looked like wedding announcements. Nothing but the best for my successful son, she kept saying. But here's where things got interesting. About 2 months before the party, Marcus started acting strange during family gatherings. He seemed stressed, distracted, constantly checking his phone. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd just mutter something about work pressures and change the subject. Aunt Linda, however, interpreted his stress as dedication. Look at how hard Marcus works, she'd tell anyone who would listen. He's so committed to excellence, he brings his work ethic to everything he does. That's what separates successful people from others. Meanwhile, my business was exploding in the best way possible. We'd landed 3 major clients in 2 months, including a Fortune 100 company that wanted us to revamp their entire digital presence. The contract was worth more than most people make in 5 years, but when I tried to share this news, Aunt Linda just smiled patronizingly. That's nice, dear. Marcus just got another promotion, you know. They're making him director of client relations. He'll be managing a team of 15 people now. Isn't that wonderful? Real leadership experience. The gaslighting was becoming unbearable. No matter what I achieved, she'd immediately counter with something about Marcus that somehow diminished my accomplishments. When I mentioned speaking at a national conference, she'd talk about Marcus's important business meetings. When I shared photos from a vacation I'd earned through my hard work, she'd mention Marcus's company retreat to somewhere equally nice. But the most infuriating part was how she'd started weaponizing my success against me. She'd make comments like, well, Sarah can afford to be generous with her money since she doesn't have real responsibilities like Marcus does. Or it's easy to take risks when you don't have anyone depending on you like Marcus does. She'd somehow twisted my financial success into evidence of my irresponsibility, my independence into proof of my selfishness, my unconventional career into evidence of my immaturity. It was masterful manipulation, really. She'd taken my strengths and reframed them as weaknesses. The final straw came during Marcus's engagement party planning. Aunt Linda asked me to help with the decorations, but when I suggested some elegant modern touches based on my experience with event marketing, she shut me down immediately. Oh, honey, this needs to look professional, not creative. Marcus's colleagues will be there, important business people. We need something sophisticated, not experimental. She said experimental like it was a dirty word. Then she hired a professional event planner, someone I actually knew from industry connections, and spent the entire consultation dropping hints about how she needed someone established and reliable because this isn't some casual gathering. The event planner later texted me, "Your aunt is exhausting." She kept talking about how her son is so successful and responsible, unlike some people in the family who choose unstable careers. I wanted to tell her I know exactly how successful your agency is, but I figured that wasn't my place. That message was a wake-up call. Aunt Linda wasn't just comparing me unfavorably to Marcus within our family. She was actively bad-mouthing me to strangers, spreading her narrative about my supposed failures to anyone who would listen. I realized then that this wasn't just family dysfunction, it was systematic character assassination. For years, I'd been trying to prove myself worthy of basic respect and recognition, not understanding that Aunt Linda had never intended to give me either. My success threatened her carefully constructed narrative about Marcus being the family's golden child, so she had to find ways to diminish it. The engagement party arrived on a perfect October evening, and Aunt Linda was in her absolute element. She'd orchestrated everything to showcase Marcus as the pinnacle of success and stability. The country club was decorated like a royal wedding, complete with ice sculptures and a string quartet. She'd invited everyone from Marcus's firm, his college friends, distant relatives, and basically anyone who could witness her son's triumph. But something was off about Marcus that night. While Aunt Linda glowed with pride, making rounds and telling anyone within earshot about his incredible career trajectory, Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. He kept stepping outside for phone calls, his jaw tight with stress. Jennifer seemed confused by his behavior, constantly asking if he was feeling all right. Aunt Linda, oblivious to her son's distress, was having the time of her life. She'd cornered a group of his colleagues and was regaling them with stories about Marcus's childhood, his academic achievements, his rapid rise at the firm. "He's always been special," she gushed. "Natural leadership qualities, incredible work ethic. Not everyone in the family has that drive, unfortunately." I was standing nearby when she made that comment, and I saw Marcus's colleagues exchange glances. One of them, a woman named Patricia, who I'd actually met through business connections, caught my eye and looked apologetic. It was clear Aunt Linda had been sharing her opinions about my unstable career choices with Marcus's professional contacts. The evening's low point came during the speeches. Aunt Linda had insisted on a formal toast, complete with a microphone and spotlights. She stood up radiant in her designer dress and launched into what can only be described as a sermon about success, responsibility, and making the family proud. "My son Marcus represents everything we value," she began, her voice carrying across the room. "Hard work, dedication, choosing security over fleeting dreams. He's shown what it means to build a real career, to make responsible choices, to be someone others can depend on. This is where things get absolutely insane, you guys. The bomb that's about to drop will literally change everything, not just for my family, but for everyone at this party. If you're enjoying this wild ride, hit that notification bell because what happens next is the plot twist nobody saw coming," she continued, her voice growing more passionate. "In a world where some people chase fantasies and call it entrepreneurship, Marcus has shown the value of real commitment, real achievement. He's everything a parent could hope for in a son." The implication was crystal clear. She was using Marcus's engagement party to take yet another dig at my career choices. But this time, she was doing it in front of his colleagues, his friends, everyone important in his professional life. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation and rage. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus stood up abruptly, his face pale. "Mom, can we not do this right now?" Aunt Linda looked confused. "Do what, honey? I'm just telling everyone how proud I am of your success." "The thing is," Marcus said, his voice shaky, "there's something I need to tell everyone. About my career. About my job." The room went quiet. Jennifer reached for his hand, looking worried. Aunt Linda's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" Marcus took a deep breath. I got fired 3 months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Linda's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally something approaching panic. "What?" she whispered. "I've been unemployed for 3 months," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "I got let go during the restructuring. I've been looking for work, but the market is. It's really tough right now. Aunt Linda looked like someone had physically slapped her. All evening she'd been bragging about his success, his stability, his bright future. The foundation of her entire worldview was crumbling in real time. But Marcus wasn't finished. And the worst part is, I've been too ashamed to tell anyone because I knew. I knew how disappointed you'd be, Mom. I knew you'd think I was a failure, just like. He trailed off, but everyone in that room knew exactly what he'd been about to say. Just like me. The family disappointment. The one who'd chosen the wrong path. Aunt Linda was frantically trying to do damage control. Oh, honey, this is just temporary. You'll find something better. You have such valuable experience, such a strong resume. But the spell was broken. All those colleagues she'd been impressing with stories of Marcus's success were now witnesses to the revelation that he'd been unemployed for months. The golden child narrative lay in ruins. I should have felt vindicated, but honestly, I just felt sorry for Marcus. He looked relieved but terrified, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, but he wasn't sure if he could handle the consequences. That's when Aunt Linda made her biggest mistake of the evening. In her desperation to salvage the situation, she turned her attention to deflecting blame. And naturally, she turned it toward me. Well, she said, her voice sharp with barely controlled panic, at least Marcus had a real career to lose. Some people in this family have never even tried to build something legitimate. The audacity took my breath away. Her son had just revealed that everything she'd been bragging about for months was a lie, and her response was to attack me for my actual ongoing success. That's when Patricia Marcus's former colleague stepped forward. I'm sorry, but I have to say something here. Patricia cleared her throat, and the entire room turned toward her. She was a senior executive at Marcus's former company, someone I'd actually collaborated with on several projects through my agency. Her expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. Mrs. Rodriguez, Patricia said, addressing Aunt Linda directly, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here tonight. You've spent considerable time talking about real careers and legitimate success. But I feel compelled to share some information that might provide important context. Aunt Linda's face went white. I don't understand what you mean. Sarah Martinez. Patricia continued gesturing toward me. Runs one of the most successful digital marketing agencies on the West Coast. Her company, Catalyst Creative, has been our primary marketing partner for the past 18 months. The campaign she developed for our Q3 product launch generated over $15 million in revenue. You could have heard a pin drop. Aunt Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus looked shocked, Jennifer seemed confused, and every single person at that party was staring at me with new understanding. Patricia wasn't finished. In fact, Sarah's agency handles marketing for 7 Fortune 500 companies. She employs 23 people full-time, provides comprehensive benefits, and has been featured in Forbes Entrepreneur and Marketing Week. Her annual revenue exceeds what most corporate executives make in their entire careers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. While Aunt Linda had been diminishing my achievements for years, I'd actually been far more successful than Marcus had ever been, even at the height of his corporate career. But Patricia saved the best for last. And here's something I think Marcus's family should know. When the company went through restructuring and had to let Marcus go, it was Sarah's agency that we contracted to handle his department's responsibilities. Essentially, Sarah's team took over the work that Marcus and 3 of his colleagues had been doing. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Aunt Linda's carefully constructed world was crashing down around her. Not only was her golden child unemployed, but the family failure she'd been disparaging for years had literally replaced his job function and was making exponentially more money doing it. Marcus finally broke the silence. Sarah, I had no idea. Mom always said your business was just a hobby, that you were struggling. That's when everything clicked for me. Wait, I said, my voice growing stronger. Marcus, what exactly did your mom tell you about my work? He looked uncomfortable. She said you were barely getting by, that you were always stressed about money, that your business was unstable and you might have to get a real job soon. The manipulation was even worse than I'd realized. Aunt Linda hadn't just been undermining me to the rest of the family, she'd been actively lying to Marcus about my situation, probably to make him feel better about his own struggles. Marcus, I said gently, I bought my house outright 3 years ago. No mortgage. I drive a Tesla that I paid for in cash. Last month, I took my entire team on a company retreat to Hawaii. I'm not struggling. I haven't struggled financially in over 5 years. Jennifer spoke up for the first time. But your mom said. She looked at Aunt Linda, confusion evident on her face. You said Sarah was always asking family members for money that she couldn't afford. I have never asked anyone in this family for money, I said firmly. In fact, I've been the one helping out when needed. I paid for Grandma's car repairs last year. I covered Cousin Lisa's medical bills when she couldn't afford them. I've been contributing to the family emergency fund that we supposedly don't talk about. The revelations kept coming, each one dismantling another piece of Aunt Linda's carefully constructed narrative. The family members present, aunts, uncles, cousins, were looking at each other with growing realization. How many lies had they believed? How many times had they dismissed my achievements based on Aunt Linda's distorted version of reality? But the biggest shock was still coming. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Sarah, I need to show you something. Mom, I can't. I can't keep this secret anymore. He pulled up a text conversation and handed me the phone. The messages were between him and Aunt Linda, dating back several months. As I scrolled through them, my blood pressure rose with each exchange. Marcus, Mom, I'm really struggling to find work. Do you think Sarah might have any connections in marketing, Aunt Linda? Absolutely not. Sarah's business is a joke. She's barely keeping her head above water. The last thing you need is to associate your professional reputation with her failures. Marcus, but I heard from Jennifer that Sarah's company is actually doing really well. Aunt Linda, Jennifer doesn't understand business, honey. Sarah puts on a good front, but she's living paycheck to paycheck. I've heard her on the phone with creditors. She's going to crash and burn soon, mark my words. There were dozens of messages like this, each one more infuriating than the last. Aunt Linda had systematically prevented Marcus from reaching out to me for help, advice, or even professional connections. She'd rather see her son struggle with unemployment than admit that I might be in a position to help him. But the most damaging message was recent, sent just 2 weeks earlier. Marcus, I'm thinking about starting my own consulting firm. Do you think that's a good idea, Aunt Linda? God, no. Look at what happened to Sarah. Entrepreneurs always think they're successful until reality hits. Stick to finding a real job with a real company. Don't make her mistakes. I looked up from the phone to find the entire party staring at me. Marcus looked ashamed, Jennifer looked horrified, and Aunt Linda looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. You've been sabotaging your own son's potential opportunities, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, because you couldn't handle the possibility that I might actually be successful. The weight of her deception was staggering. For years, she'd positioned herself as the family's voice of reason, the one who understood real success. But her judgment had been so clouded by jealousy and the need to maintain her narrative that she'd actually harmed her own son's career prospects. The party had essentially stopped. Conversations died as words spread through the room about what was happening. Marcus's friends and colleagues were witnessing a complete family meltdown, and Aunt Linda was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. This is all being taken out of context, she said, her voice high and strained. I was just trying to protect Marcus from getting involved with unstable ventures. Patricia shook her head. Mrs. Rodriguez, with all due respect, there's nothing unstable about Sarah's business. We've worked with her agency extensively, and they're more reliable and innovative than most of the large firms we've contracted with over the years. That's when Uncle Tom, Aunt Linda's husband, and Marcus's father spoke up. He'd been quietly observing the entire exchange, and his face was grim. Linda, he said, his voice carrying a warning tone, we need to talk. Privately. But Aunt Linda was past the point of damage control. Years of maintaining her false narrative were catching up with her, and she was doubling down instead of backing down. Everyone here needs to understand something, she said, her voice growing louder. Success isn't just about money. It's about respectability, stability, contributing to society in meaningful ways. Running some little internet business from your house isn't the same as having a real career with real responsibilities. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. Even after everything that had been revealed, she was still trying to diminish my accomplishments. That's when Jennifer, of all people, stood up. I'm sorry, but I have to say something. Marcus has been stressed and depressed for months because of his job situation. He's been so ashamed, so worried about disappointing everyone that he's barely been sleeping. And you've been making it worse by telling him that the one person in the family who might understand entrepreneurship and could offer real advice was a failure. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Sarah, I looked up your company online after Marcus told me about you. I've been wanting to suggest that he reach out to you for months, but every time I brought it up, he'd say his mom warned him against it because your business was failing. The manipulation was even more extensive than I'd realized. Aunt Linda had created an entire alternate reality where my success didn't exist, where my achievements were failures, where my stability was instability. She'd convinced not just the extended family but her own son and his fiancée. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, why would you do this? Sarah could have helped me. She could have given me advice, maybe even offered me contract work while I was looking for something permanent. Instead, I've been struggling alone because you convinced me she was struggling too. Aunt Linda's facade was completely cracking now. I was protecting you. Sarah's lifestyle isn't sustainable. These small businesses fail all the time. I didn't want you to pin your hopes on something that could disappear overnight. My business has been growing consistently for 8 years, I said, my patience finally exhausted. I have contracts extending through next year. I employ nearly 24 people who depend on me for their livelihoods. My lifestyle includes owning my home, maxing out my retirement contributions, and having enough savings to weather any economic downturn. What exactly did you think you were protecting Marcus from? But I wasn't finished. 8 years of accumulated frustration were finally finding their outlet. And let's talk about sustainability, I continued. Marcus had a real career, with a stable company, and he still got laid off. At least when you own your business, you control your own destiny. You don't get blindsided by corporate restructuring or budget cuts. The truth was harsh, but necessary. Aunt Linda's entire worldview was based on outdated notions of job security that didn't even exist anymore. The stable corporate career she'd held up as the gold standard had proven to be just as vulnerable as any other professional path. Patricia nodded in agreement. Sarah's right. The corporate world isn't what it used to be. Entrepreneurship, especially in the digital space, often provides more security than traditional employment. At least business owners have diversified revenue streams instead of depending on a single employer. Uncle Tom finally stepped in more forcefully. Linda, enough. You've embarrassed our family, hurt our son's prospects, and spent years bad-mouthing Sarah based on what? Jealousy. The word hung in the air like a slap. Jealousy. That's what this had always been about. Aunt Linda's eyes flashed with anger. Jealousy of what Sarah runs around playing businesswoman while the rest of us have real responsibilities, real contributions to society. She's never had to answer to anyone, never had to prove herself in a real professional environment. She answers to clients who pay her millions of dollars, Patricia interrupted. She's proven herself to some of the most demanding companies in the world. Her work has generated hundreds of millions in revenue for major corporations. What more proof do you need? That's when Marcus pulled out his phone again. There's one more thing, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something I just remembered. He scrolled through his contacts and pulled up a name that made my heart stop. Catalyst Creative. Accounts payable. Sarah, he said, looking directly at me. What's your company's full legal name? Catalyst. Creative Marketing Solutions, LLC. I replied, though I had a sinking feeling about where this was going. Marcus's face went completely white. Oh my God. Oh my God. What Aunt Linda demanded. What's wrong now? Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Mom. Sarah. I think I know why this feels so familiar. At my old job, I used to process payments to external contractors. There was one company we worked with regularly, one of our biggest partners. He held up his phone showing a contact entry. I used to authorize payments to Catalyst Creative. For 18 months, I was literally approving invoices. I was signing off on payments to Sarah's company. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the irony was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. The moment Marcus made that connection, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just the revelation that I'd been successful all along, it was the realization that Marcus had been directly involved in my success without even knowing it. While his mother spent years telling everyone I was a failure, he'd been signing my paychecks. Wait, Marcus said frantically, scrolling through his old work emails on his phone. I need to check something. The party guests watched in fascination as he pulled up months of archived correspondence. His face grew paler with each email he opened. Here, he said, his voice cracking. March 15th. Payment authorization for Catalyst Creative Marketing Solutions, $340,000 for Q1 digital campaign management. I signed this. I literally signed this. He kept scrolling. April 22nd, $275,000. May 18th, $425,000. June. He stopped looking up at me with a mixture of awe and horror. Sarah, how much was I paying your company monthly? The retainer was usually between $250,000 and $400,000 depending on campaign scope, I replied quietly. Plus performance bonuses. The numbers hung in the air like bombshells. While Aunt Linda had been telling everyone I was struggling financially, her son had been authorizing payments to my company that exceeded most people's annual salaries. Every month, Marcus sat down heavily, his phone still in his hands. I can't believe this. For over a year, I was processing payments larger than my annual salary to Sarah's company, and I never made the connection. I never realized. You weren't supposed to realize, I said gently. Client confidentiality is important in my industry. I never would have mentioned working with your company even if I'd known you worked there. But Aunt Linda wasn't ready to accept defeat. Even faced with overwhelming evidence of my success, she was still trying to find ways to diminish it. Well, she said, her voice sharp, with desperation, anyone can throw around numbers. That doesn't mean Sarah was actually getting paid that much or that the business was profitable after expenses. That's when Patricia stepped in again, and her next words delivered the knockout punch. Actually, I can speak to that. As part of our vendor management process, we conduct annual financial reviews of all major contractors. Sarah's company has profit margins that most Fortune 500 companies would envy. Her net income last year alone was more than what most senior executives make. She paused, then delivered the final blow. In fact, when we calculated the cost per performance metrics, Sarah's agency delivered better results at lower cost than the three major advertising firms we'd worked with previously. That's why we expanded the contract and why Marcus was processing such large payments, because the ROI was extraordinary. The vindication felt surreal. For years, I'd been defending my choices, my career, my success against Aunt Linda's relentless criticism. Now, in front of everyone who mattered to both of us, the truth was finally being exposed in the most dramatic way possible. But the story wasn't over yet. Uncle Tom had been making phone calls throughout the evening, stepping outside periodically to talk privately. Now he returned with a grim expression and pulled Marcus aside. After a brief, intense conversation, Marcus's face went from pale to green. What now, Aunt Linda demanded, her control completely gone. Marcus looked at his father, then at me, then back at his mother. Dad just talked to his friend at the unemployment office. Apparently, there are programs for displaced workers that help with career transitions, including grants for people who want to start their own businesses. That's wonderful, honey, Aunt Linda said, relief evident in her voice. You can get back on your feet. Mom, Marcus interrupted, the program has been available for 6 months. Sarah qualifies as a registered mentor for entrepreneurship grants. If I'd reached out to her when I first lost my job, I could have applied for up to $50,000 in startup funding with her as my business advisor. The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Linda's interference hadn't just prevented Marcus from getting advice or emotional support, she'd literally cost him access to substantial financial assistance and mentorship that could have completely changed his trajectory. Jennifer was the first to speak. You mean Marcus could have started his own business months ago, with funding and professional guidance? And it gets worse, Marcus continued, his voice hollow. The application deadline was last week. I missed it because I didn't even know it existed, because I never talked to the one person in my family who would have known about these programs. Aunt Linda's face crumpled as the full extent of her sabotage became clear. Her need to maintain her false narrative about my failures had prevented her son from accessing opportunities that could have transformed his life. But karma wasn't finished with her yet. Patricia approached me as the party began to wind down. Sarah, I hope this isn't inappropriate given everything that's happened tonight, but I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? We're opening a new division focused specifically on digital transformation for mid-market companies. We're looking for a director of strategic partnerships, someone who understands both the corporate world and the entrepreneurial landscape. Someone who could build bridges between companies like ours and innovative agencies like yours. My heart stopped. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a six-figure salary, full benefits, equity, participation, and the autonomy to structure the role however you think best. You could keep running your agency as a side business, or we could explore acquisition possibilities. Either way, you'd be creating a new model for corporate entrepreneurial collaboration. The irony was perfect. While Aunt Linda had spent years insisting I needed a real career, I was now being offered a corporate executive position precisely because of the success I'd built through entrepreneurship. But the most beautiful part was Marcus's reaction. Instead of jealousy or resentment, his face lit up with genuine excitement. Sarah, that's incredible. And Patricia, do you think? Would there be room for someone like me in that division, someone who understands corporate operations but wants to learn the entrepreneurial side? Patricia smiled. Actually, yes. We'd need several team members who can translate between corporate culture and startup mentality. If Sarah agrees to lead the division, she'd have significant input on staffing decisions. And just like that, the family dynamic shifted completely. Marcus wasn't just getting a potential job opportunity, he was getting it through my success with my endorsement in recognition of skills I'd help him develop. Aunt Linda stood alone in the corner watching her son and me discuss business possibilities with one of his former colleagues, seeing everything she'd tried to prevent coming to pass in the most positive way possible. The engagement party ended not with celebration of Marcus's corporate success, but with planning sessions for our professional collaboration. The family failure had become the family success story, and the golden child was finding his path through the person his mother had spent years diminishing. As guests began to leave, several of Marcus's colleagues approached me with business cards and collaboration ideas. Word had spread quickly about my agency's capabilities, and what started as family drama had turned into unexpected networking opportunities. But the most meaningful moment came when Marcus pulled me aside as the evening wound down. Sarah, I owe you the biggest apology. For years I let Mom's narrative shape how I saw your choices. I should have reached out myself, should have gotten to know your work instead of accepting someone else's version of your story. You don't need to apologize for believing your mother, I replied. Parents are supposed to give us good guidance. It's not your fault that hers was compromised. But I do need to apologize, he insisted. Because part of me was relieved when Mom said you were struggling. It made me feel better about playing it safe, about following the conventional path. Your success challenged me to think differently, and that was uncomfortable. The honesty was refreshing and painful at the same time. How many people had been invested in my failure because it validated their own choices? What matters now is what we do next, I said. And if you're serious about exploring entrepreneurship, I'm here to help. The night ended with Aunt Linda and Uncle Tom leaving early, barely speaking to each other. The rest of the family stayed late, asking questions about my business, my journey, my plans. Suddenly, the same people who'd been politely dismissing my achievements for years wanted to understand how I'd built something successful. 6 months later, Marcus joined Patricia's company in the new Strategic Partnerships division, a division I ultimately decided not to lead, preferring to maintain my entrepreneurial independence. But I did accept a consulting contract to help establish the program, and Marcus became my first corporate liaison. The work suited him perfectly. His corporate experience gave him credibility with traditional business leaders, while his family connection to me provided authentic insight into the entrepreneurial mindset. He flourished in the role building bridges between established companies and innovative startups. More importantly, our family dynamics shifted permanently. Aunt Linda never fully apologized, but her power to shape the family narrative was broken. Other relatives started sharing their own entrepreneurial dreams, asking for advice, celebrating unconventional successes. The most satisfying change was watching Marcus develop his own voice. No longer dependent on his mother's approval or definition of success, he started taking calculated risks, pursuing opportunities that excited him rather than just impressed others. And the business world being what it is, our story spread through professional networks. The tale of the failed entrepreneur who turned out to be signing her cousin's paychecks became a cautionary story about assumptions, family dynamics, and the importance of direct communication in professional relationships. Patricia later told me that our family drama had sparked important conversations at her company about unconscious bias network effects and how personal relationships can either limit or expand professional opportunities. As for Aunt Linda, she gradually faded into the background of family events. Without her constant commentary and comparisons, family gatherings became more relaxed, more supportive. She learned, perhaps too late, that building others up is more powerful than tearing them down. The most unexpected outcome was how our story resonated with others facing similar family dynamics. When I eventually shared the experience publicly, hundreds of people reached out with their own stories of family members who couldn't accept their unconventional success, who preferred them small rather than celebrate their growth. I learned that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. Aunt Linda's need to diminish me wasn't just hurting me, it was limiting her own son's potential. You know what's crazy about this whole experience? It taught me that sometimes the people closest to us can be the biggest obstacles to our growth, not because they don't love us, but because our success challenges their own choices and beliefs. Have you ever dealt with family members who couldn't celebrate your unconventional path? Maybe someone who kept waiting for you to come to your senses instead of recognizing that you'd already found them. Drop a comment and let me know your story. I read every single one and love hearing how you've navigated these complicated family dynamics. And if this story resonated with you, please smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama with satisfying endings. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that family criticism doesn't define your worth, your results do. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living your truth and letting your success speak for itself. The people who matter will eventually listen, and the ones who don't, well, that says more about them than it does about you.